You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm Shanier Mershon, your guest host, and I am a relationship manager with Training Pros, the sponsor of this podcast. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. We like to say when you have more projects than people, let us help find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. I have a very special guest joining me today. We're fortunate to count her as one of our clients. She's all about making big organizational improvements through smart strategic programs. She's a real gift for taking complex ideas and turning them into clear, actionable plans that actually move the needle. By using data to guide decisions, she helps teams cut through the noise, focus on what matters, and drive real sustainable growth. I'd like to introduce you to Tori Pauling, Learning and Development Leader at a Berkshire Hathaway company. Welcome, Tori.
Thank you. So excited for this conversation today.
Yeah, so happy you're here today. Thank you so much for joining. If you would you introduce yourself to our audience a little bit? Tell them who you are, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I work for a Berkshire Hathaway company supporting learning and development across a diverse portfolio of businesses, primarily in manufacturing. So I lead the strategic learning initiatives for our Business Acumen Center, designing and scaling programs that help our leaders connect learning to real-world business results. I bring a background in communications and executive learning, and my focus is on ensuring that every program is driving measurable impact, not just participation. So I help build scalable, best-in-class offerings that are rooted in real-world application, not just theory.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And, we all kind of have our own little story around how you fell into L&D or why did you pick L&D? So what about L&D first attracted you to the field?
Yeah, so I've always really loved taking complex topics and finding ways to simplify them to help others be able to build clarity and confidence. For me, L&D really scratches that itch because it allows you to combine creativity, strategy, and impact. So it allows me to solve problems while also empowering people at the same time. There's something incredibly fulfilling about knowing that the work that you're doing is helping others grow and succeed. And so from the very first program that I ever designed to today, my favorite part of the job is actually getting to work with learners and then more importantly, getting to follow up with them 3 or 6 months later and see the impact that we've seen as they've applied the things that they learn. So that combination of the clarity, the creativity, the impact, that's what continues to draw me to this work.
Totally understand that. And your passion for clarity and impact has really shined throughout our relationship. And so, building on that, let's talk about how the L&D field itself has evolved from your perspective.
Yeah. I think there's been a really big shift from event-based learning to continuous embedded learning experiences. And I think this comes from an increased demand for proof of ROI. Learning has to actually drive business results now. I often say it's not enough to just be counting butts and seats with attendance tracking. We have to show that what we're doing has an impact on the business. So there's a shift to a smarter use of data and data automation and personalization to reinforce learning long after the session ends. I also think there's a higher bar for what constitute engaging learning, especially when it comes to virtual learning. If I think back to 2020, when a lot of learning went virtual for the first time for a lot of organizations, if you could do a Zoom poll, you were a rock star. You were best in class. If you knew how to get people engaging in a Zoom chat, you were top tier when it came to delivering virtual learning. Today, that's just not the case. Everyone knows how to do that. And so the bar for what is required in order to hold people's attention, especially in virtual training, has continued to go up and up.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's clear that the expectations for L&D and the experiences that we provide have grown, right? And rightly so. We're always looking for improvement. So I think that, that sparks a key question. How do you ensure that the learning initiatives are directly tied to your organization's strategic goals, right? And why is that alignment so critical?
We start every initiative by asking, what business problem are we trying to solve? The framework that we use is the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning, which allows us to design for those outcomes, not just activity, not just hosting trainings. I think alignment is critical because if our learning isn't moving the needle, we're missing so much opportunity. And so one of the key business outcomes or business problems we're often trying to solve for is profitability. So if we're able to connect the training that we're doing to real business outcomes like increased profitability, that ROI speaks for itself. Now, sometimes when I say that, people will bristle a little bit. But as one of my mentors says, profit isn't a dirty word. It's a measure of how efficiently you deliver value. So from a learning perspective, if we're able to deliver more value more efficiently, and we're able to help people apply what they learned, we're driving profitability. And so that's the bar that we hold our programs to, that we're solving for real business problems and trying to achieve real business outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not a dirty word. It is the name of the game, right? And so in order for us to also be seen as a strategic partner, a business partner, we need to be able to speak their language, right? And prove those results and those impacts. So, on that same vein, what advice would you give to L&D professionals who are trying to shift from being seen as a support function to a strategic business partner?
Stop asking, what training do you need? Start asking, what problem are you trying to solve? Too often, we operate as a training vending machine where someone asks for a course, we develop it, we pop it out without a question. That is not strategic, and that is not a partnership. As a true partner, you are going to listen to the request, and then you're going to dig in and uncover what's the underlying business problem behind that request. Then you can explore the best solution, which may or may not be training. Sometimes training is not the right tool for every need. Being honest about that, suggesting a better path forward, that builds trust and credibility between you and your other business partners. You don't earn respect by saying yes to everything. You earn it by delivering real, measurable outcomes. How do you do that? You have to learn the business. You have to understand the P&L. You have to understand the customer priorities. You have to understand what the operational challenges are. When you dig in and you understand the business, that allows you to go deeper and say, okay, what's driving this request for training? Then I can analyze and see if that's the right fit. So bring data and insights to the table and position yourself as someone who's trying to drive outcomes, not just training programs.
That's really powerful advice for anyone looking to elevate their role in the business. I think sometimes saying no is a hard thing and that this is not the right thing for the business, right? It's a hard thing to do because we want to help and we feel like, okay, we can do it. We'll figure it out. But it's not the right answer all the time, right? So I think that, once you've really been seen as a strategic partner, though, the next challenge is making sure the learning experiences that you deliver, they actually stick, right? So what advice do you have, or how do you create learning experiences that stick and continue to deliver value over time?
The most effective learning that I've seen is experiential. People are going to retain more when they're actively engaged with the material through doing rather than just listening. So we try to design programs that emphasize application, reflection, hands-on decision-making, as much as possible through real-world exercises or simulations. Simulations in particular are really powerful because they allow the participants to apply the concept without the emotional baggage that comes with their own business. So if we're trying to teach them something, we're asking them to change something about the way they're operating. And if I'm looking at it through the lens of my own business, I rightfully so have emotional attachments to our products, our services, our customers. And that emotional investment can sometimes make it harder to adopt a new mindset or a new approach. And so a simulation gives you the opportunity to remove that bias. It gives people the space to become a believer in the principle or the framework first in that neutral environment. And then when we transition and it's time to apply those concepts to their actual business, that's when the simulation becomes this mental anchor that they can return to and connect to. So when those emotional ties start to try and make them stop or resist, you can go, I completely understand. And you validate that. You go, remember, in round 2 of the simulation, we covered this scenario. Do you remember the decision you made then? It's not always easy, but it's worth it. So as much as possible, giving people the opportunity to be hands-on with their learning. And simulations don't have to be in person, right? There's so much great software and tools out there that allow you to do simulation or other types of experiential learning virtually. But that experiential learning, it creates clarity and confidence and continuity, which helps that learning stick long after the session is ending. And it's not just about engagement. It's about creating those moments that people carry back with them when they're back in the real world and living within their business, doing the day-to-day.
I love the concept of a mental anchor and the moments that people carry back with them to the business. I think that's key, and that would really help people internalize new ideas, apply them with confidence when they're back in the business, right?
Yes.
So for learning to really kind of take root, I think it needs to be part of something bigger, right, as well. So what do you think are the key ingredients or factors that are important for building a culture of continuous learning where continuous learning thrives?
The most important factor is leadership. It starts with leaders modeling learning. When they're the first to raise their hand for a development opportunity, it sets the tone for the rest of the organization. In addition to that, the program needs to be highly relevant, practical, connected to the business outcomes so that people can see the value in applying what they've learned. Another thing we consider is being really intentional about prestige. So are there certain programs that are invite only? Do we have programs that offer PDCs, certifications, or other career advancing credentials? That external value can help us build internal demand. One last thing I'll hit on is that because we support a portfolio of companies across a wide variety of industries, our offerings have to be better than what the individual companies could go out and get on their own. So that means that we really focus on bringing in true experts. We don't want the person who read the book. We want the person who wrote it. And so those are all of the components that we use to try and create a pull system where people aspire to be selected for development rather than a push system where people feel obligated to come and attend training.
Makes sense. And I think that credibility, we talked about that earlier, trust, right? And bringing in those experts is also another way to infuse that. So it's spot on. What's your perspective on, another thing that a lot of people say is we just need to push out this training and just have it an event, right? So what's your perspective on learning as an ongoing process rather than a one-time event?
This is a huge transition for organizations to start treating training as a journey rather than a one-day event. So what kind of pre-work can we put into place that prepares learners to be able to take action when they come to attend an actual training? What kind of support are we giving to managers so that they're able to help with the application of the learning? And then what kind of follow-up and check-ins have we built into our programs to help reinforce that application and accountability? One of our most popular programs in the Business Acumen Center is a 1.5-day workshop. And when I meet with business leaders, when they want to sign their teams up for this workshop, we have a full timeline that we lay out explaining that you're signing up for 6 weeks of pre-work, 1.5 days in person, and then 12 weeks of implementation. And so you're not able to just come in and check the box and say, okay, I've done XYZ training. There's pre-work where your team has pre-work that they need to do to get that knowledge transfer piece done. There's data preparations that we have knowledge and the information we need to be able to apply these principles. And then when we're together for that 1.5 days, we're not just trying to teach you vocab words or transfer knowledge. We're actually there applying this principle and this framework to your business. And then coming out of that, each of the teams in that session creates an action plan. So we take all the ideas they have swirling around in their head and we say, okay, ideas are great, but if we don't do anything with them, we don't get the ROI from this training. So they create action plans. And then for 12 weeks, there's a follow-up process to see, are they applying and what have they learned? What are the challenges that they've run into? So we measure the before and after state of the business, and that's our measure of whether the training worked. And that's how we get away from just delivering training and more about trying to deliver measurable change.
Got it. Yeah. I used to call it campaigns, if you will, learning and development campaigns, where there's the pre and then there's the event and then you've got the sustainment activities. And it's, changing that mindset of it's just an event to it's a campaign or it's a full program. I'm curious how some of the leaders that when you explain to them that it was a 6-week of pre-work and then 12 weeks after, like what their reaction was. But we can talk about that another time, but
No, it's fine. I'll say the number one reaction I get is, well, this isn't like training I've done before. And usually not in a negative way. It's just an observation. And that's true. And that's the point, is we are trying to get away from it's a one-off training where we come in, we drop a bunch of knowledge on you, and then you never hear from us again, to, okay, what is the business need that you have? How can we tailor this training to fit that need? And then how can we help support you through the application afterwards?
Yeah.
And the results speak for themselves. A business that I was working with last year went from having mandatory overtime every single weekend, and now they've reduced their mandatory overtime and they've 3x'd their profit each month.
Wow.
So the results are there. And again, it goes back to that leadership piece. They have a leader who dug in and said, this is what we're doing, and he's supported them all the way. And so the leadership with training that's designed for application, those two things, can't hold them back.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great results. You've talked a lot about impact and just in this last statement as well. And how do you decide where to invest your time and resources, right? Where do you focus that you're going to get the biggest impact?
So we are an 80-20 company. If you're familiar with 80-20 or the Pareto principle, it says that 20% of your efforts drive 80% of your results. And that applies across businesses. 20% of your customers drive 80% of your revenue. 20% of your products or services drive 80% of your revenue. It's part of our culture, and it's how we prioritize across the board. So in learning and development, we know that 20% of our efforts are driving 80% of our results. So what are the 20% of our programs that are truly moving the needle on business outcomes? Within those programs, what 20% of the content or the pre-work or the simulation is responsible for the impact that we're seeing? Once we understand that, we're able to reverse engineer other offerings around those proven approaches. But honestly, that's kind of the easy part. The easy part is digging in and saying what's working well. The hard part, and where most teams get stuck, including ours, is being willing to deprioritize the 80% that's driving only 20% of the results. Now, this doesn't mean we're cutting them out entirely, right? Those programs still have a purpose. Those pieces of content within a program were put in for a reason. But what it means is just treating them differently. So maybe we're shifting them to low effort formats like on demand or virtual rather than in person, so that we can free up resources to spend more of those resources on the 20% that's driving 80% of our results.
Yeah.
But really the ultimate goal of our 80-20 approach is to free up time to think. Everyone is busy. We all have a million things we could be doing at any time. And no matter what you think, that to-do list will never be empty. And so practicing 80-20 allows us to free up time to stop and be strategic, because when we have that time to think, we can step back, we can reflect, we can plan. If we're just constantly rolling out one training after another, we're just executing. We're not being strategic. And so 80-20 is what helps us shift from doing more to doing what matters most.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really smart way to approach prioritization. I think we could use that in almost every area of our life, not just in learning and development, but definitely there for sure.
Yes. When you become an 80-20 practitioner, all of a sudden you'll go home and you'll look at your closet and you'll go, okay, I wear this shirt every single week. And then I have this holiday sweater that I wear once a year. Why are they together commingled? Let me put that sweater somewhere else. Let's just keep the things I wear regularly here. And all of a sudden, it's faster to get dressed in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I need to do that. So Tori, in today's fast changing world, there's a lot of different things that people are focused on, and new technologies and tools. And let's talk about skills for a minute. So what skill do you think really matters the most right now that will help people be successful?
I think one of the most important skills is being able to take complex topics and distill it into something that is simple and clear and actionable. My biggest successes have come from being able to deeply understand complex systems and then make them easy to learn without losing their impact. So we're not making it simpler and less effective, we're making it simpler and more effective. As a consultant, I once worked with a leader who had compiled over 20 years of training materials on a key business concept. And they wanted a better way to teach the next generation of leaders how to do this. And so I immersed myself in those materials. And once I understood that underlying principles within them, I was able to design a program that trained everyone. So across all departments of an organization, from your frontline leaders to your executives, and do it in a way that made sense for each audience. We brought in experiential learning here. We designed a simulation that allowed them to experience the concept rather than just sitting in a conference room being told that, hey, this works, trust me. No, that's not how we learn. So instead, they went through 3 rounds of simulation where they slowly, line by line, learned, here's how it works. And the results have been really, really incredible. While there have been results on the profit side, I think the bigger win is the fact that we've seen major shifts in mindset and in leader buy-in. So earlier this month, I was in Europe, and a leader who had attended more than a dozen trainings on this particular topic told me that over the years, he thought he had learned everything that there was to know. And he was genuinely surprised to walk away from that session with new insights. Now, did we present anything new? No, it was the same core concept. The difference is that we repackaged it in a way that gave them room to think and apply and internalize. Because that's the reality, right? We're all busy. We all want instant gratification. And so if we can help people move through that learning curve and the change curve faster, without sacrificing quality, without sacrificing outcomes, because we've made it more simple, that's a win for everyone.
Yeah. No, it's a great reminder of the value in making the complex very simple, right? And doing that and the kind of impact that you can have on your organization, but also the individual who thought they knew it all, as in this example, right? Or at least on that topic.
Yeah, and rightfully so, because they did.
Sure.
Right? They had attended those dozen trainings. They did know it all. The difference is it was just delivered in a different way that gave them that time to think and apply it differently than they had in the past.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Well, Tori, as we wrap up today, we like to leave our listeners with one final takeaway, if you will. What is 1 or 2 books that you think every aspiring L&D leader should read?
I'm going to break the rules, and I'm going to share more than 1 or 2 because I have a hard time narrowing this down. I mentioned earlier that we use the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning. That is my L&D Bible. It's the foundation of how I think about impactful learning. And why training is only valuable if we're delivering meaningful change. If you're new to the 60s, there's a really great white paper available online that introduces the model. If you just Google search the 60s or the 60s of breakthrough learning, it'll come up. But what I find myself reaching for even more these days is actually the field guide. So I have it here. It sits on my desk at all times. It's the field guide for the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning. The reason I like the field guide is because while the original book lays the foundation, this one is full of practical tools and case studies and how-tos. So if you're in that situation where you're trying to decide, is training the right tool for this situation, there's a decision tree in here that you can go through and see, is training the right option? If not, what else could I explore? It's a really powerful tool to help you stop that training vending machine and instead act as that strategic partner. Another one of my favorite tools is the Learning Transfer Climate Scorecard. So it helps you assess how likely is it that the learning is actually going to be applied within your participants' work environment. And if it scores kind of low, it actually gives you advice on here's how you can improve that climate to increase the likelihood of application. So checklists, decision trees, how-tos, all kinds of things that you could have if you just want a book full of tools as an L&D professional.
Awesome. No, that's great. I think we all could use a little bit of practical application and examples for us to reference and pull from when we're not quite sure, right? So
Absolutely.
awesome.
Another one I would highly recommend is Leading Change by John Cotter. Mine is old and beat up and has markings all over it. But I think this is critical because when we're asking people to learn something new, we're asking them to change. And successful change doesn't happen on accident. And change is more effective when it's led by a leader that's visibly engaged and is modeling what's being taught. And so our most successful programs are the ones where the leader is already bought in before the session even starts. When they're reinforcing what we're learning or even co-facilitating alongside us, the impact multiplies. And without that leadership buy-in, training often fails to take root because it becomes that one-off event rather than a catalyst for transformation. So that book does a great job just helping you think beyond learning events and into the organizational behavior and momentum of change.
Got it. Any others? Since I feel like you might have
You
one.
know me so well. I have one more that I have to share. This is Resonate by Nancy Duarte. Many people are familiar with her work or have taken her classes or used her templates. But the most powerful presentations and learning experiences follow the structure of great storytelling. And so Resonate teaches you how to engage people emotionally and intellectually through narrative and visual design. Too often we're sitting in that conference room and we see someone pull up a slide that has 7 bullet points on it and they're just reading those bullet points to us. People don't remember bullet points on a slide. They remember stories and emotion. So if we want the learning to stick, we have to move beyond just information sharing and do emotional engagement. And so that's what this book did for me. It helped me reframe what a good PowerPoint slide looks like, how I think about the learner journey, and how I combine that visual storytelling with experiential learning to maximize the impact of the training session.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you shared that last book because it is very true, right? People will remember the emotional connection, how they feel about it, not the bullet point number 4 that you're trying to get to. So,
Exactly.
so with that, I, for one, have had a very wonderful emotional connection today, and I will remember this conversation for a long time to come. And hopefully our audience has also, it's resonated with them as well. So it's been a pleasure having you on our show today, Tori. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Good. Yeah, no, and we want to express our sincere thank you. And as a gift for being on our show, Training Pros is going to plant 5 trees in your name. We as a company, our charity is World Reforestation. And so we've planted over 4,000 trees to date around the world. And so as a thank you today, we'll plant 5 in your name. So thank you so much.
Amazing. What a wonderful thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's just our little way of letting you know how much we appreciate you and joining us on Learning Leader Spotlight. So thanks again, Tori.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.